We have your bracket buster. Big Daddy is in. That's right. Morning, everybody. Good to be with you on this edition of Bury Your Bookie. Mike Jones, normally with us on Mondays, had a previous engagement. In fact, I think he said something along the lines of, I'm undergoing a procedure. Now, when we were younger, that would have meant that there was some kind of legal activity that was going on in your life, and perhaps you were going to have to do a deposition to stave off losing all of your money to your soon-to-be ex-wife. But now when a guy mentions something about a procedure, you're thinking, let's hope it's something very mild and common, like a colonoscopy, which is a pain in the ass, but nonetheless, it's a lot better than something that is being done to stave off the inevitable, which, of course, is that Grim Reaper from Father Time. Good to be with you, though. Mike's okay, and we don't have any of his selections. I'm looking over the NBA card tonight. A lot of big spreads out there. A lot of teams are just battling in total desperation. Some trying to maybe juxtapose positions, stay out of that play-in horror story that the NBA playoffs bring about, which actually, as much as I'm opposed as a purist of postseason to bastardizing the playoffs and including 20 out of 30 teams, which is absolutely – the NHL used to be ridiculous when they had 4 out of 6 making it back in the days of the 6-team league. 20 out of 30 teams. It's not exactly creating a lot of depth and meaning to the regular season if you're only eliminating 10 teams, one-third of the teams in the league. But it does make the battle at the end kind of interesting. So if you wanted to make a case, if you're Adam Silver, for the meaningless nature, the Jean-Paul Sartre type nature of the regular season, certainly you've done it by including all of these teams in the postseason. But at least at the very end, since the postseason is all that seems to matter, you do have some element of intrigue in terms of juxtapositioning of teams at the very end of the regular season based on even the final game of the regular season. Now, if you are betting these games, and a lot of people would consider you criminally insane if you were betting a lot of money on NBA games, which have been highly unpredictable for most gamblers all year long. College basketball, a much more solid bet. And we'll get to that bracket buster because Big Daddy is in the tournament in just a sec. But we do want to tell you that BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. They have the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball, the NHL, UFC. There were a lot of big fights over the weekend. Are there always big fights in the UFC? Do they do this every week? I think so. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with the odds, the stats, and more for every game, every play, every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, so my bracket buster, I love the weenie conference tournaments. I really do. I'm a big fan of that. I like seeing the teams that have qualified so far, and one of which is, as we call them, Big Daddy, because I predict at the beginning of every season, watch out for Lipscomb. And Lipscomb gets into the tournament courtesy of their victory in their conference tournament. Lipscomb beating North Alabama. North Alabama, I want to say, without doing a ton of research on this, but I did take a glimpse at the standings because of my curiosity about these one-bid conferences where everything is riding. The conference tournament, okay, we know that the SEC, they're going to get 12, 13 teams into the tournament. So how significant is their conference tournament? Maybe the championship means something because Auburn is now hanging on there as maybe the number one overall seed. If they win the conference championship, do they out-duel Duke to the wire? Are we going to get Duke favoritism? That's possible. And how influential is that? That's the other question, because we know that the clear path rule originally applied to Duke, and their clear path that they're often provided to the championship round, the Final Four, as they almost routinely would get the easiest, the softest of draws in whatever region happened to have the least competitive number of teams. And that was part of the whole favoritism thing that people resented. So I don't know if that same Duke resentment still hovers and filters through your thinking and your inclination to maybe see them strike them right out of your bracket in the second round because you want them to go down. But Big Daddy, I don't know if they have a chance to win a game. I saw none of their play. I believe they've tied for their conference championship with North Alabama, as I said, in a regular season. They beat North Alabama handily. They win the Atlantic Sun. So they are in the field, along with High Point, already a qualifier, out of the Big South. Drake from the Missouri Valley Conference. Southern Illinois, Edwardsville. That's got to be the longest of shots, no? Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, out of the Ohio Valley. What was it? Al McGuire that always said, watch out for the teams with the hyphens. Those are the ones that get you. That was a great line. Omaha gets in by one of my favorite considerations, double disqualification. Well, in this case, it was a situation where St. Thomas, who won the conference championship, and this is in the Summit Conference, Omaha gets in with the automatic bid because St. Thomas is a transitioning team, which we're a little reluctant to use the word transitioning with what's going on in the political climate right now. But nonetheless, they are transitioning from whatever is subdivision 1. What is it called now? It's no longer Division 2. How simple was that by comparison? But they are transitioning and becoming a Division 1 school, so they have to sit out a couple of years, I believe, of eligibility to make it into the NCAA tournament. So even though they would have qualified, they're out. And Omaha gets in by virtue of being the Summit Conference runners-up. So you have a couple of weenie teams in there. I don't know if any of them spell upset, but certainly something to consider as the major conference tournaments get underway this week. I believe most of the big ones start tomorrow and should be a little bit of an indicator as to who might get in there on a roll as you head for the NCAA tournament and try to fill out your brackets. But don't overlook Big Daddy if you're going to be betting the tournament there. Do they go in? I don't know. Did they end up being like sometimes when you're looking at the seeding, like how is that team an 11th seed? I mean, you would think they were at rock bottom at 16 and have to go against a powerhouse number 1 seeded team in the opening round. But we shall see if that holds up. All right. This is a bad development for any kind of gambler. And it's happening to me. I'm not sure if it's a byproduct of old age or whatever. And all of you, any young people tune in to Bury Your Bookie to try to get some selections and some insight into things, probably would not have experienced this. But when you're getting shut out on a mind bet, it's not a good condition. I mean, this is degenerate Alzheimer's. Shut out. Think about the concept there for a second. You're not betting any money. You're not putting up any cash. You're not risking anything. Maybe if you're in a public forum like this and you're giving selections, you are thinking, I don't want to necessarily deal with the embarrassment. I don't want to have LeBron James coming up to me and saying, you told me the Cavaliers couldn't lose. Don't speak about my son like that. That was a whole other big story over the weekend. Stephen A. Smith. And LeBron James. LeBron James, was he out of line in approaching Stephen A. Smith? You become fair game when you become a professional for any level of criticism. As long as you're not attacking the guy and making racial statements or anything like that. But he was saying, and look, the business lends itself to the idea of exaggeration to make a point. So if you're talking about Bronny James, is he the worst basketball player that ever walked the face of the earth? By no stretch of the imagination. Is he worthy of a second-round pick of the Lakers? What's a second-round pick that far at the bottom of the draft? How many times, all of you diehard sports fans out there, did you ever watch with any level of interest whatsoever? I mean, unless you're some kind of basketball freak, you're not watching the second round of the NBA draft at a 53rd pick to see who the Lakers are going to take, are you? But you did this year. And why? Because there was a lot of hype around this story. So with a lot of hype comes a lot of criticism. Some of it may be particularly unflattering and unjustified, maybe even a little bit over the top and insensitive. But is it not part of the equation? If you're an athlete, do you have to have blinders? I would not say to everything. I don't know that you need to go run our test on people and run into the stands, regardless of how harsh and how cruel some of the things that are being hurled at athletes verbally and maybe even physically are. But if you're LeBron James and you set up a situation like that, do you have to tell Stephen A. Smith basically to fuck off if you happen to see him courtside? Is it something that you think, listen, I mean, you bear some responsibility for yourself. because you orchestrated this whole thing. Should LeBron James be entitled to that kind of gratuitous consideration by the franchise? You can make an argument that, yeah, they should have considered if he wanted his grandmother to be on the roster, as long as she didn't get any valuable minutes. Was only coming in there in garbage time, so you pay her $8 million on a 2-year deal. And you realize that at best she should be playing in Istanbul somewhere. But there's a call for confrontation. That's an interesting one because as a member of the media, there was a credo at one time when a lot of the sarcastic commentary started to become in vogue, and in sports talk, there was the notion that you shouldn't say anything on the air or anything publicly. Now, with the expansion of availability with streaming services like this, where everybody has a podcast, everybody who has a cell phone essentially is now a broadcaster, which is fine. Everybody's entitled to try and establish and cut out some kind of platform. But should you go by the credo, and very few people probably could hold up to this if they were particularly in terms of being disparaging in their commentaries, saying things that really were largely in poor taste. And you can get away with pretty much saying anything. Hell, this is no filter. That's part of the reason that it was established here. So, it's a platform that you can liberally sprinkle your opinions with what may be considered exaggerations to make a point. That's part of the game. They're a part of giving somebody an illuminating view. But should you only say things in public that you would not be afraid to say to whoever it is that you're pointing this criticism at, that you would not be willing to say to their face? That's an interesting concept. I used to try to abide by that, but I don't know that I really. And you don't mean any of this in a lot of ways. I mean, Stephen A. Smith essentially is an entertainer. Is he entertaining people at the expense of the reputation and the sensitivities of LeBron James and Bronny James? Yeah, of course. I mean, that's also. I mean, not to say that anything that's over the top should be justified and condoned no matter what it is. But I would have to say that, look, the guy's an entertainer. He's doing his thing. LeBron's put himself out there and largely benefited from very flattering opinions about what he does. So it's kind of a 50-50 mix there. I don't know where LeBron benefits by confronting Stephen A. Smith, who, if he considers him a clown and his opinion to be worthless, then why would he even consider stopping to go ahead and make it clear that he wasn't happy with what was going on? It reminds me of a story from many years ago where I happen to be friendly with a guy named Murray Langston, who campaigned in his comic career. It was largely known as the unknown comic, which is kind of, how much of an oxymoron is that? He was largely known as the unknown comic. Now, he had been an accomplished comedian. He was a background performer on a lot of these shows like Laugh-In and things like that, Lola Falana, going way back when they used to have these collection of sort of skit players as comedians that were part of the show. So anyway, he ends up going on a Gong show out of desperation. Desperation, often the mother of invention, as it is in gambling as well. And one of the things that he did as the unknown comic was he was always poking fun at Nancy Sinatra. So I'm at a party at his house one day, and one of his buddies comes out and says, "Hey, Murray, you ought to take this phone call. It's Frank Sinatra." And he said, "Frank Sinatra? What, are you kidding me?" So he gets on the phone. He figures it's one of his friends, one of his comic friends that does a Sinatra impression, goofing on him. And he's basically telling Frank Sinatra, the real Frank Sinatra, to fuck off the entire time. And then he comes out of the house, ashen white. He comes out to the pool to announce that the party is over. And that it turned out that it was Frank Sinatra. And he was saying that if he didn't agree, that he was going to drop all the stuff about Nancy Sinatra on the Gong show immediately, that he was going to be sending over a few people. And it wouldn't be unusual to find that there might be some injuries. And so, I mean, you can be playing with fire with that. I understand that. And I don't imagine there'll be any consequences from either side, really, except a little bit of embarrassment, again, I suppose that was thrown at Bronny James that he was cast into this situation. But I'm sure he's fine with it and realizes what the heck is going on. But interesting. I mean, should you only make comments that you wouldn't be afraid to say to somebody's face? And let's face it, sports fans, we all love it when this shit happens, don't we? There's some kind of subliminal pleasure that is reached. I don't know if it's quite orgasmic, but when you see that some reporter has been picked up and body slammed into the lockers by an angry athlete, not to advocate violence, there are better solutions to problems. But what sports fan doesn't enjoy watching that tape? When Jim Rome and Jim Everett got into it over the Chris Everett thing, ESPN2, it was a fledgling network, didn't even know it was going to work. There's Jim Rome, already an accomplished radio star, and he's making the transition into television, which I don't know that any of his shows were great. But he had a moment there because it was an infamous moment that left an indelible impression on the broadcasting industry, right up there with anything. Well, when Jim Everett says, "You don't have the guts to call me Chris to my face." And so finally, he's coerced into by Jim Everett to say, "Yeah, Chris Everett." And as soon as he says it, Everett just slams him through the wall. And let's face it, I don't know. There must be some, thrill in seeing that happen to somebody that's been a wise ass, and to just, have their lunch handed to him, so to speak. So the mind bet thing is kind of crazy. I know I got off on a tangent there with the whole, but it's interesting to me being in the broadcasting business forever, where should you abide by that whole credo about don't say anything about somebody you wouldn't say to their face, as awkward as it might be. So we're looking at the golf tournament. I was forced to make a pick last week. We had a technical issue, and we weren't able to get again with Mike Jones. I hope this procedure is nothing of a medical nature, whatever it is that he's doing today. But so I was perusing the list. I like betting golf, although if you're only taking one player and you're getting somebody at 20 to 1 or greater, which you don't have to go that deep into the field. I mean, let's face it, this guy, Russell Henley, who won the Arnie Palmer Bay Hill Classic this week and did it in style. But he beat a guy that I was about to, and I don't know if I brushed or touched on this when I was giving out my pick, my failing pick of Justin Thomas to win the golf tournament. And this was, kind of expedited, very quickly on the air as I realized, hey, geez, we're supposed to give people a game or something that they can look at and embrace. And so we're going to go ahead and venture out and make a pick. And we've had some success on our own selections here. But it's torture because here it was only a mind bet. And yet I felt like part of the reputation of the show was on the line here as we give out Justin Thomas, who had been playing well. Does he look like a winning player? Does he still have the drive, the desire? I mean, he seems to be having too much of a good time, doesn't he? Justin Thomas. It strikes me as being he was like America's sweetheart there for a while after Spieth kind of fell off. And then it was Spieth and Thomas and Thomas and Spieth, and that's all you heard about. It was Arnie and Jack and Arnie. Now, neither guy blossomed to the level that you thought, but maybe that whole idea of concept of being one of the greats of all time has been so overshadowed by the accomplishments of Tiger Woods that nobody will ever stack up for that level of greatness. I mean, is Rory McIlroy in that category? He's won a lot of tournaments, been a contender, always a real gentleman, seems to be. But I don't know. I mean, the bar is too high at this point. Nobody's ever going to come close to that. So I don't know that you would consider the careers of Spieth and Justin Thomas to be, I mean, so full of promise in the beginning that they've sort of under-delivered as they've leveled off. But I thought he was in there with a little bit of a shot. I really did. Now golf's tough to judge. I think the more you watch of it, if you really were going to get into this, you could probably end up making some significant scores if you struck at the right time. Because in this tournament, another guy's been knocking on the door and hasn't won for a while, or so it seems. I mean, just without looking up any statistical data about his last win, Colin Morikawa was 22 to 1 coming into the tournament. So I'm looking it over real quickly while I'm actually doing a show. Like, who the hell can I pick from this golf tournament here? I had a couple of notes and some odds written down. And I started to say Morikawa, 22 to 1. And then I went with Thomas, who was like 28 to 1. So here's the question: would you rather? Now, I bet no money on this. I did not take Colin Morikawa to bet the win the tournament. In fact, I ended up having no stake in it whatsoever. I am going to go in a little golf pool, which is fascinating, and I'll pass some of the details along to you guys on Wednesday because this is one of the best ways, most entertaining ways that I've ever gambled, and that's saying a lot. Was the way this golf pool was constructed, where you pick one player from 7 different lists of 10 players, and they're bunched by rankings. So you know, you're not getting Scotty Scheffler and the next 5 guys in the men's rankings. If you pick Scheffler, you're picking against some really good players on that particular list, and then it has all different levels where you have to make a selection, and then cumulative score ends up winning the thing, and you can. I mean, depending on the stake coming in, this one's pretty light at $50, but you can walk away with $5,000, which isn't bad. And every shot becomes of monumental consequence and significance if you happen to be alive, even going into the third day. Now, the devastating thing in the pool is if your guy misses the cut, you get +3 for the last 2 rounds of the tournament on that player, +6. That's going to be a lot to overcome. But we'll get into some of the details on that. So would you feel badly about giving out Morikawa with no money on it when this tournament flip-flopped on 16 in such a bizarre fashion? And it happens sometimes in sports, and that's why some beatings are justifiable if you're whining and crying about them forever. If you had Morikawa in this tournament and you saw the way that the lead flip-flopped, now he's up a couple of shots. This Henley, who wins the tournament, is starting to make some inroads in, and then you get to 16, a relatively makeable birdie putt sitting in front of Colin Morikawa to open up what appeared like it was going to be a 2-shot lead, because 50 feet away is Henley off the green, slightly in the rough and on the fringe, but a very makeable lie and a possible get it close type of lie where he could have just as easily birdied the hole. But he holds it from 50 feet for an eagle, flip-flops the lead, and then does a good job staving off Morikawa on the way back. Morikawa couldn't buy a putt for the life of him. And if you were betting on this thing, you were dripping blood by the time they got to 18, literally dripping blood. But I got shut out on a mind bet, and I feel good about that because I didn't make the bet on Colin Morikawa. I didn't punch it in, and then the tournament went off. And in golf, you get up until the guy tees off. So I had plenty of opportunity to bet Colin Morikawa before the first round. Had I done so, the agony of defeat would have been overwhelming here today, having seen how that tournament was lost. Although you can take nothing away from the winner, he was up there in contention, and it was his 5th win. But you were getting 40 to 1 on Henley. This is the beauty. You could be wrong 39 more tournaments after this if you took the guy. That's why it's a great bet. And if you play it, and we'll get into this a little bit maybe on Wednesday for the pool. And I would imagine that these kind of pools are available online. I happen to be I don't want to get the guy in any kind of a jackpot, but betting it with a private guy who runs the pool. Did they even crack down on that anymore? That used to be a big thing in my home state of Florida here. They would literally send guys in, SWAT teams with battering rams, and bust the cleaning lady who was running the NCAA tournament. All of a sudden, they were taking the woman who ran the front desk at the radio station I was working at out in handcuffs because she had the tournament materials. There was an evil sheriff here. He was featured a few times on like a Geraldo type of episode named Nick Navarro. And he was busting all of these low-level gambling pools, the people that came in with the parlay cards to bars. I mean, these were the people he was taking off the streets. Imagine what a horror show it was back then when gambling was supposedly so taboo. All right, so yeah, Morikawa misses out. We whiffed on a mind bet. I got shut out. I didn't even get the bet in. And that would be degenerate Alzheimer's, wouldn't it? So hopefully we won't get shut out on anything else the rest of the way this week. All right, you have the conference tournaments coming up. We'll have some insight into that. Scotty M's been on fire with college basketball. Troy West from Seattle, of course, he's been pushing Gonzaga. And maybe we're pronouncing that wrong because he always calls it Gonzaga. And if that's the case, I would imagine that somebody that lives in the city where the school exists probably would know the pronunciation. No, it's like their hometown school, for God's sake. So we might have been getting that wrong, but he's been pushing the virtues of them. Michigan has fallen off the bandwagon here. They're getting beat by double digits. Our man Dusty May came from Florida Atlantic University, had Michigan playing some really high caliber basketball until 3 games ago. And now they're getting in fights. They're losing, like I said, by double digits. They get clobbered by Michigan State. They lose to them twice in a short span of time and find themselves a little bit of a nosedive as they head to the tournament. Interesting, too. I don't know if you guys caught 60 Minutes last night, saw that piece on Danny Hurley. What a fucking nut job. We've been watching his rather demonstrative antics on the sidelines forever. I mean, nobody goes as apeshit as this guy, do they? We've seen all kinds of things, guys throwing jackets on the ground. Throwing chairs, Bobby Knight. We've seen all kinds of really bombastic sort of sideline behavior by college basketball coaches, to the point where you're wondering, how did this lunatic ever get the job in the first place? Is there any kind of psychological test that is applied to scoring a college basketball job, or is it just a matter of being able to lure the highest paid of recruits? Hurley, tremendous job. Nobody could deny that. Back-to-back college basketball championships in this era. Are you kidding me? And on 60 Minutes last night, the strangeness of this cat was, just clearly illuminated to levels that you never thought were possible, because he's out there like with incense underneath the stands there, planting garlic and doing all kinds of ritualistic type of stuff. And you don't know if you're in a basketball game or you're in Jonestown there getting ready to take a sip of the Kool-Aid. What the fuck are we talking about here, Danny Hurley? Crazy, man. The ties to the occult. And the way he approached this whole thing was kind of bizarre. It's a good piece on 60 Minutes on Danny Hurley if you're a college basketball fan. I will not be. Are they even a possibility? Did they have to win the conference tournament, UConn? To get in, they didn't have the greatest of seasons. If ever John Feinstein, our good friend, was going to do a follow-up to his great book on Bobby Knight and the Indiana Hoosiers, A Season on the Brink, it would have been this 24-25 season to follow the University of Connecticut as two-time defending NCAA champions. All right, conference tournaments on tap. We'll have some insight into that, like I said. Sorry that we whiffed on the mind bet, but you would have lost anyway with Colin Morikawa. I didn't see Henley coming. I didn't get that far down the list. And if you had him at 40-1, you deserve the championship trophy for the Arnie Palmer Bay Hill Classic. Tournament Players Championship this week. That's a lot of fun. So if you're ever going to wager on golf, it's the majors and this one. Always classic, where you're on 17 and you have to take your dentures out so you don't bite your tongue as your guy is teeing off, maybe with a 2-shot lead and one kerplunk in the water, and it's all over. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. For the people at Bet Online, Greenlight Ventures, and, of course, NoFilter.net. I'm Jeff DeForrest, and we'll see you tomorrow on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.